If someone's talking a lot of smack, but they're not willing to take a match with you, it can be a bit frustrating, especially if you think they can't walk the walk.
I don't think Tim can actually back up what he's saying.
And if you're competing against him as a coach, you're going to do whatever it takes for your team to win, and that includes showing your team some of your favorite tricks.
Okay, come on. Inside. Inside. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. Let me try.
Now, I don't know if I haven't been paying attention or if people just are not doing this because I've never seen this before. And it's so simple yet so brilliant because the way our opponent's going to break our inside grip is by kicking their leg to the outside, which would give us an easy ability to bring our foot to the inside. And then we can start doing our thing from there. And if they don't free their leg, you can just pass it to your second hand and finish your pass from there. Now, we like to give Izaak a hard time, but he's one of our best friends and he's on our team.
The more you shit talk your friends, that's the more you like them.
And Izaak's been there from coach to coach, from country to country, and from continent to continent. And Izaak's going to be going up against the #1 pick, who is actually a really cool guy, but he's on the other team. So you know damn well that we're going to do everything we can to make sure Izaak wins. And during that match, they roll out of bounds. And before they reset, you have 3 seconds to give Izaak some advice. What would you tell him? And the good news is, Craig Jones was mic'd up. And in this video, we're going to dive into what Craig told Izaak and how we can use that to improve our game.
Izaak, 50-50, don't let him step over your shoulder. This is your time.
So Craig tells Izaak from 50-50, don't let him step over your shoulder. Now, when I was watching this, my initial thoughts were, cool, Craig, but we're not in 50-50, we're in outside ashi. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe Craig is trying to warn Izaak to not let that foot get over the shoulder from outside ashi because Craig got his back taken and ultimately finished from that position. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you're entering into the position, you have to put their foot on top of your shoulder for the entry, which puts you in a bit of a dangerous spot once you get there. But Isaac's already settled, he's got an Achilles grip. I don't think there's much concern of his opponent stepping over his shoulder. And then I'm thinking, okay, maybe Craig's telling him to switch from outside ashi to 50-50, which Izaak was able to do successfully. But sometimes when you're making that switch, your opponent can take that opportunity to shoot their foot above your shoulder. And now you're dealing with a lot of back exposure and things start to fall apart. So then I'm thinking to myself, cool, got it, we're on the same page, Craig. But then he says it again.
Izaak, do not let him step over the shoulder.
So at this point, initially I was pretty confused, but now I'm pretty confident that Craig is talking about this primary leg and how we can't let that leg get over our shoulder. Because earlier in the match, Izaak found himself in 50-50 and his opponent slips out of the heel hook, putting his foot above Isaac's shoulder and ultimately resulting in an escape. Now there's 2 ways our opponent can slip out of a heel hook. The first is a heel slip, which would leave their foot still in our armpit. The second is a toe slip, which would put their foot above our shoulder, which is exactly what happened to Izaak the first time he attempted this. The toes slipped out, the foot ended up above our shoulder, which ultimately led to an escape. Now, the only real difference I noticed between the first and second attempt, and if you notice something different, please leave it in the comment section below, but the thing that I noticed that Izaak changed the second time around was that he took this grip here as opposed to the first time where it was on his opponent's knee. And I think taking the grip lower down the leg makes it pretty darn difficult for his opponent to slip their toes, which is ultimately how they're going to be able to step over our shoulder. But what if we're a day late, dollar short, they slip their toes, their foot gets above our shoulder? What do we do? I think a popular thing to do nowadays is to transition back to outside ashi and go for an outside heel hook, which is not as strong as an inside heel hook. And as we're trying to transfer, our opponent could very well shoot their foot above our shoulder again. Or as we kind of loosen up to make the switch, they can slide out. So I think kind of a classic scenario is this. You'll enter into the legs with their foot above your shoulder. So you'll need to find a way to tuck it underneath your armpit and go for a heel hook. And they're going to try to slip their heel, slip their heel, slip their heel until eventually they can slip their toes and put their foot on top of your chest. And as you try and bring it back to outside ashi and go for an outside heel hook, they're going to try and shoot their foot back over your shoulder. And now we find ourselves in outside ashi with their foot above our shoulder, which nothing really happens in this scenario. Tackett just escapes, but it's definitely a recipe for getting your back taken. Now, if you're anything like me, coming up as a white and blue belt, I didn't really study leg locks. And now as a purple belt, I began to study a lot of heel hooks because that's what a lot of the top level guys are doing in competition. And as a result of that, I never really got to study knee bars very much. And one bit of advice that Elon Musk has for us is that you can't remember what you cannot connect. And for the longest time, I couldn't really see how knee bars could connect with what I was primarily studying, which was heel hooks. But Kyle Chambers almost catches Andrew Tackett in this knee bar. and it came off of a situation where the foot is above the shoulder. And then I kind of thought to myself, another submission that I just kind of disregarded, didn't really study too much, is the Mikey lock. And again, that's another submission that's done with the foot above our shoulder. And again, I kind of disregarded it because I didn't really see how it connected to the overall system. But based on what Craig said to Izaak, we know how important it is to not let our opponent step over our shoulder. And one way to make that difficult is by taking this grip here. But I think another way to do that is by having consequences if your opponent does step over your shoulder. And those consequences can be a legitimate knee bar threat or a Mikey lock. But if your opponent thinks to themselves, man, I'd like to step over their shoulder to defend the heel hook, but if I do, there's going to be consequences. So your opponent feels like they really have nowhere to go. And that is how we create dilemmas and ultimately become a very scary person to grapple against. Now, I just launched my website, and if you follow the link in the description below, you can click on upcoming events and see that the Who's Next finale is on July 14th, so be sure not to miss that. And you can also get discounts on apparel, book recommendations on different podcasts, or even supplements. So be sure to check that out, and we'll see you in the next video.